Greetings, music fans. How are you doing? Welcome to Full Record Jacket with Phil and Ben.
Hello.
So, Ben, on this edition, I thought we'd delve into a particular genre of music.
Go on.
So,
what are we talking about, Phil?
I thought, well, we could do hip hop, we could do metal. Well, we couldn't really because we don't know anything about it. But we could do jazz fusion. We could do country. We already did country with you not long ago.
We've done country,
we could do blue-eyed soul. We could do
gospel thrash metal,
industrial grindcore, easy listening. All sorts
garage grind.
There's all sorts of things we could do. But I thought on this particular edition that we would discuss a genre that may or may not officially exist, but I've decided it does exist, and that is Dadrock.
Dadrock.
Now, the term Dadrock, do you remember when you first heard the term Dadrock?
Yeah. I don't remember the exact time, but it would have been in the 90s.
In the 90s. Now, do you think it was coined by anybody?
I don't know.
I think it may have been coined by your mate, Noel Gallagher. I think he said something about Dadrock, and I can't remember now whether he said it back in the 90s when he was still, cool, and he was talking about older music being Dadrock, or whether it has been in more recent years when he said, after he went solo, basically saying my music's now Dadrock. I'm not quite sure, can't quite remember, but I'm pretty sure Noel Gallagher has said something about Dadrock.
I would associate Dadrock, for me, would have been in the 90s, so it would have been things like the Travelling Wilburys, Chris Rea.
Yeah. Because
that sort of...
Now, see, I overheard a conversation of a snippet. When you overhear a snippet of a conversation in a pub?
Yes.
And you just hear one line of it, but somebody says something that kind of sticks. And there were some guys, and they were younger than me. I don't know how old they were, maybe probably your age. And they were talking, and one of them was saying about, I can't remember in what context, but he was saying, it was all listed as classic rock. It says, or as I would call it, dad rock, right?
Yeah.
Now, when people talk about classic rock, again, this is...
Because I know you're sort of saying Zeppelin.
Yeah. So
Dadrock, Queen.
Classic rock can go back to the 60s, can't it? And classic rock can include bands like Zeppelin and Cream.
Queen.
But what
Deep Purple would be a Dadrock band.
But what I'm trying to separate here, because in my definition of Dadrock, it's music... Because most bands, not all, but most bands, when they start, certainly rock bands, they're appealing to the youth culture, aren't they?
Of that generation,
yeah. Because people have, for example, described would stick the Rolling Stones in a classic rock category. But I would say that the Rolling Stones, when they started, of course, were appealing to the youth. Okay, so they go through this period of appealing to the youth. And then as they get older, if the artist or the band continues a longer career, they tend to then obviously their fans age with them and they tend to be then making. But I'm saying that just because somebody might have a dad who liked punk or heavy rock when he was younger and still likes it now, which is very cool, okay, that's fine. But I don't think that music just becomes dad rock because older people like it and look back on it. I think dad rock to me is rock music that was kind of middle of the road when it was made.
Inoffensive.
Yeah? Well, that's one thing that you could
Robert Palmer.
You could say that it's more on the middle of the road side, and it was aimed at a more mature.
Sting.
It wasn't aimed at the youth market. It was aimed at a more mature market. So I think that's one way to define it. And you've just mentioned those two, and I guess Sting, you see, because would you say the Police was dad rock, or was the Police just about kind of...
I think it was just on the edge. Because
just on the edge of being... They weren't super youthful.
They weren't cutting edge enough, were they?
They weren't aimed at the youth in the way that, say, the Sex Pistols were. but
Yeah.
they weren't completely. They were still a little bit sort of cutting edge at the time, weren't they? They were a little bit new wavy, a little bit,
Yeah, I mean, Dire Straits,
Oh,
Deep
yeah,
Purple, they would sort of be in my dad rock.
yeah. No,
But definitely things like the Travelling Wilburys, because I think most dad rock. If you Mark Knopfler, George Harrison, Tom Petty, Chris Rea, they've all got a similar sounding sort of sort of voice, and that to me just says dad rock.
I kind of know what you mean.
It's very inoffensive. It's very sort of, yeah. I mean, technically, the bands are, I mean, people would say now, like my children would probably say, Oasis are dad rock. So, but I would disagree with that one. I think you've
Yeah,
got to have,
they weren't dad
there's a
rock. They
certain
weren't dad
tone
rock.
to it,
They
isn't
weren't
it?
dad rock in the '90s because they were more, they were a bit rebellious. They were appealing to the youth. They
Yeah,
weren't
yeah.
aiming at an older audience in the '90s. You could argue that Noel Gallagher is now aiming at an older audience with his music now. So you could say that Noel Solo is a dad rock artist,
Well,
couldn't
do
you?
you want me to shock you with something?
Yeah,
I have just typed in to that popular search engine,
yeah,
dad rock bands.
yeah.
I'm going to read some of them for you, and you can tell me. I mean, there's a couple in here I'll go with. Van Morrison, The Eagles, Tom
Yeah,
Petty and the Heartbreakers, Steely Dan are dad rock bands in my eyes. Now, what do you think to these? This is what Google, it's sourced it from around the world.
this is Google, not ChatGPT.
No, this is Google.
Okay.
The first one it comes up with is Nirvana.
No, so I don't
Second,
think it's just because some of the Nirvana fans are now dads
dads.
doesn't mean
Van Halen.
Nirvana was not dad rock at the time.
I could give you
Now
a
Van
million
Halen again
guesses.
were too early on. Van Halen were not dad rock. They
Look,
weren't
I mean,
really.
Tom Petty's in there, but I could give you a million guesses, and you would not get one of the bands that is listed here.
Is it what as dad rock?
Yeah.
Is it the Sex Pistols?
No.
Is it the New York Dolls?
No.
The Stooges?
No.
MC5? I'm thinking of bands that are not dad rock, that were too cutting edge and too cool.
No.
The 13th floor elevators.
900,997 guesses later.
You're saying this is a band that is really not dad rock, but
It's really. I don't think it's dad rock yet.
you think it's too cool, too
Yeah,
cutting
but
edge.
I've just gone on to another band, a thing called Ultimate Dad Rock Bands, and it's
Yeah,
got some of them in here. I will tell you the name of this band:
yeah,
Limp Bizkit.
yeah. That's ridiculous. I mean, but that was. I mean, I'm not sure. Well, that was one of those bands that never really impressed me at all. But I don't think it's either good youth culture music or good dad music. To
Here
be
you go.
honest.
Here you go. I've just found this site: the UK's Ultimate Dad Rock Bands by region. This was done June the 4th, my dad's birthday, 2024. Murchoid asked 2,000 Britons the questions: which band truly epitomises dad rock today? And in 10th place, 1% of people said Limp Bizkit. At 9, with 1%, was Bon Jovi. At 8, with 4%, Nickelback.
How young were the people they were asking on this
I
survey?
don't know. At 7, with 4%, is Blur. 6th, with 5%, Guns N' Roses. 5th, with 6%, Nirvana.
And then
Now,
the
this
people they
next one,
surveyed had to go back to school because it was the end of playtime. Is that?
Plato.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Because number 4, their debut album is only 20 years old this year. Number 4 with 10%. And this might have something to do with the last 2 albums being a bit lounge music. With 10%.
Is it the
Just
Arctic
200
Monkeys?
people. It is the Arctic Monkeys. Third, with 12%, I'll give you one guess.
The Strokes.
Blink-182. At 2, with 26%, was... I'll give you one guess.
It seems like amongst these people surveyed, almost anything that's played on guitars is considered dad rock.
Yeah.
The White Stripes.
Coldplay. And number one with 31%.
U2.
Oasis. Now, it does give me a map here of now people in what looks like Cumbria, Northumberland, sort of just inside the border of Wales, and the northwest Liverpool area, probably down to Northwich. They saw Coldplay as more of a dad rock band. People in the south, well, not really the southeast, but the south, Brighton, West London, etc. It was Nirvana. Oasis was most of Scotland, most of like East Anglia and East London.
East Anglia.
And then Anglia. And most of the Midlands and that sort of Oasis as being dad rock. So,
well, all these people are far too young. This is complete nonsense. As we all know, Ben, the true gods of dad rock, the band who arrived as pretty much fully formed dad rock in 1978, were Dire Straits.
Dire Straits, yes.
There they were. They arrived as dad rock because they were never really cool. Hip, were they? They did have popularity, and obviously, of course, they did have young fans. And if anyone's a Dire Straits fan and is getting offended by this, look, folks, I'm not dissing Dire Straits. I've got all these Dire Straits CDs, right?
I've got 4 copies of Brothers in Arms. In fact, I've got 3 Dire Straits albums. And can I just say, any man willing to go on stage with a headband on, a sweat headband, and isn't playing tennis, he's batting out of the park as far as I'm concerned.
Now, that leads me on to the question I was going to ask.
Yes.
You just mentioned. In fact, at the start of this show, you basically mentioned all the dad rock stuff that I was going to mention.
Oh, sorry.
But I was going to say, I think Dire Straits are the definitive British dad rock band, and I think they're rivaled really only by
Chris Rea.
Maybe, or I was thinking solo Eric Clapton.
Yeah, I would say Dire Straits are the ultimate because they've got that sort of laid-back guitar feel. It's kind of middle of the road. And he's got the woo-doo voice.
And he's So it could well be. So that leads me to ask the question: is Brothers in Arms the Sergeant Pepper of dad rock?
Yes, there is no doubt in it. You
think so?
I only listened to Brothers in Arms for the first time last week.
Good heavens,
the first couple of tracks, I was like, this could be the greatest album I've ever listened to. And then I got halfway through and I was like, I don't know why, but I feel like I'm bored. It kind of just felt like it was... And I did make a note. He does sound like a cross between Bob Dylan and... Who was the other artist? I made a Google note of it. But I said he sounds like a cross between Bob Dylan and somebody else. And it was
obviously, there was a big Dylan influence on Knopfler. And he did work with Bob Dylan on a couple of albums.
Who did I can't remember who it was, but he did
Cale?
Remind me... JJ Cale, that was it.
Because that was another
Bob
big
Dylan,
influence.
JJ Cale.
Yeah, that was another big influence.
So I heard a lot of that, which...
It is a good album. It is good all the way through, I think.
Yeah. I did get... Maybe because I think because I was led in by those first 4 tracks, I thought, God, this is going to be brilliant. I think maybe it wasn't the right environment to listen to it in, and maybe with my speakers on... It would sound a bit better.
You need to have the speakers on because it's a hi-fi album. That's the whole thing about this album. Now, when Dire Straits started, they came out of the pub rock scene in London in the late 70s. So this was kind of, the complete antithesis of punk, really. And they started off as a four-piece, two guitars, bass and drums.
Yeah.
Martin Knopfler's brother was in the band. He ended up leaving. There was a bit of a rift between the brothers, I gather. And then on the third album, for the recording, they brought in Roy Bittan, the pianist from Springsteen's band. So they started to sort of expand the sound. And by the time they got to Brothers in Arms, they had Guy Fletcher, keyboard player, and they were also using sax players. So it's a much bigger production. And the other thing, of course, is that Mark Knopfler was very, very keen on digital recording because he thought that it would get a more precise
this was one of the first albums
of
recorded fully digitally, wasn't it?
It was fully digitally. I mean, it's certainly there were a number of albums recorded digitally before this, and this wasn't the first CD, but it was the first CD to sell a million copies.
A million copies. That's
and
the only fact I know about it.
It did become kind of like the CD player demonstration disc for hi-fi shops. So
yeah. I think that album.
Selling.
I think it became almost like the 80s version of Frampton Live, isn't it? Everybody's got a copy of it.
We had a copy of it.
It won a couple of Grammys, didn't it? It sold about 30 million copies.
30 million copies. It was recorded at George Martin's studio on Montserrat, Air Studios Montserrat, where the Police recorded Every Breath You Take and that album, which no longer exists because it all had to be abandoned with that volcano. Back in, was that in the late 90s, I think it was.
Pesky volcanoes.
Yeah. But what was I going to say about it? Yeah, the hi-fi thing. The interesting thing about it is you say you've got some vinyl copies when you've inherited various people's collections.
And I'm going to give you a copy of it because you asked.
I haven't, because I haven't got a vinyl copy of Brothers in Arms. Now, it's kind of interesting because this was the period, the mid-80s, when lots of people were still buying vinyl as their main format. So they sold a lot. They sold a lot of vinyl copies of this record, but then of course they did sell CDs over quite a few years. I think it's fair to say the CD kept on selling. But did you know that the CD version and the vinyl version are different? Because the CD version is 10 minutes longer.
Is it?
And what they did
is there a bonus track halfway?
There's no. The songs are the same, but side 2 of the vinyl starts with Ride Across the River. It's got 4 songs on it, right?
Yeah.
That's identical to what's on the CD. Those 4 songs are identical length. But on side 1 of the vinyl, the first 5 songs, they trimmed down 4 of the songs.
In order to fit it on.
In order to fit it on. So Far Away fades out a minute early. So that's about 4 minutes, whereas the CD's 5 minutes. Money for Nothing is cut a fair bit, I think, because it's about 8 minutes on the CD. Walk of Life is the same. They didn't change that. Your latest trick, I think Michael Brecker's sax intro to Your Latest Trick was chopped off the vinyl. And I think it faded out quicker. And then Why Worry fades, I think, on the vinyl, and it goes on. I think it's got an actual ending on the CD, but it's an 8-minute track on the CD. So the CD is 55 minutes, the vinyl is 45 minutes. And depending on which one you were used to, that feels like your definitive version of the album, depending on which one you bought, really.
Because they did get in a little bit of trouble, didn't they? Is it Money for Nothing, where he makes the... It got banned, didn't it get banned or something from certain radio stations?
Yeah, because I mean
it contains the word what is now a homophobic slur, but that's because they didn't get the context of what was being said in the lyrics.
Yeah, well, of course, Knopfler was, as he did with a few songs, he overheard something in real life and turned it into a song, and so he basically wrote down. He was in a shop I think it was in New York. He was these guys who were delivering TVs and microwave ovens to this electronics shop, and the TVs were on with MTV, and they were looking up at the TV and making disparaging comments about the rock stars and the pop stars on the TV. So the whole thing about that ain't working, that's the way you do it. Get your money for nothing and your chicks for free. Is not Knopfler bragging about himself being a rock star. It's him making a kind of satirical reportage of what people are saying about him as they see him on MTV. So, yeah, the slur word is obviously what they were saying, not what Mark Knopfler's saying. But of course, if you don't get,
that's the thing, they didn't get the context.
If you don't get the context of the song, then obviously it's
because I know they had to overdub it or bleep it out, didn't they? In order to,
or it's somehow. I don't think I've ever heard the edited version. I've read all about this.
No, I don't think I have either. On Spotify, it's the unedited version.
It's unedited. Certainly, it's unedited on my 1985 CD. It's on there.
Yeah.
Did you know Sting's bit on that song at the start?
Yeah.
Where he sings "I Want My MTV."
Yeah.
And Sting sings that to the tune. It's the same melody as "Don't Stand So Close to Me" by the Police.
All right.
And Sting was happy to let Dire Straits have that for free and just as a favour to them. But he didn't have publishing control of his songs. So Virgin Publishing, whom Sting had a few run-ins with, went after Knopfler for the songwriting royalties. So the song ended up having to be credited as by Mark Knopfler and Sting. And Sting got the royalties, and obviously Virgin Publishing got some of it as well. So Sting had never asked for the credit, but he was forced into it by the publishing company.
Yeah, because they're from the same part of the world, aren't they? Because I think Knopfler was born in the northeast. Yeah. Newcastle has produced some good, Lindisfarne, Gaza.
Produced some talent.
Brian Johnson from AC/DC. Anton Deck, Sting. Other people from Biker Grove who had a single out.
From
Kevin Keegan.
From just on the other side of the river.
Kevin Keegan isn't from Newcastle, but...
Lauren Laverne, she's Sunderland. Don't call her a Geordie. She's a Mackham. But,
Sam Fender.
Yeah. Is he from north or south of the river? I'm not quite sure.
I think he's a Newcastle fan, isn't he? So.
Okay, so he's Newcastle, yeah.
Jimmy Nail.
Yes.
Crocodile shoes. So,
Alan Shearer, did you say him?
Alan Shearer, yeah, but he's never had a single out, has he?
That's true. I was about to say neither have Anton Deck, of course they have.
Yeah, they have had. Yeah. Let's get ready to rumble.
I'm thinking of people who are from the.
I've exhausted my northeast knowledge. People will probably write and go, "Oh, you've forgotten about."
You could make a northeast playlist, although I'm not sure that "Let's Get Ready to Rumble" alongside Dire Straits is going to quite
and Lindisfarne
work, is it? But.
Forgotten Tainus Almain.
I do enjoy a bit of Dadrock, and as you alluded to earlier, maybe if Brothers in Arms is the Sergeant Pepper of Dadrock, partly because it was a technical recording, it had something slightly pioneering about it technically, and that it sold shed loads of copies, and it was kind of defined an era in a way in a certain genre. Maybe. The peak of Dadrock was the formation by George Harrison of the Travelling Wilburys, because really that took Dadrock into a
Dadrock supergroup.
Yeah, a whole stratosphere, didn't it? Really.
And do you know what? The worrying thing is, I watched a Travelling Wilburys video the other day, and they're all about the same. In fact, I think George Harrison's younger than I am now.
Yeah, this is a bit of a meme that goes around, isn't there? That there's a picture of them all with the ages they were in 1988, 89.
Yeah.
And I think, am I right to think that Jeff Lynne was only still in his 30s at that point?
Yeah, late 30s, I think, wasn't he?
One of them was late 30s. He was kind of the young guy of the group. But I don't think any of them was much more than about 50. Well, was Roy Orbison about 51, 52, I think?
52, I think, yeah.
I think Orbison was 52 when he died, yeah.
He died around, yeah.
And he was the oldest of the band.
Yeah, George Harrison always looked older than what he was, but then no preservatives in your food, smoking and probably drugs. So remember, kids, you want to look young, eat fruit.
I think... yeah, because at the time, of course, how old would I have been?
42, 43?
I was a teenager at the time. And
what, 1989? 1889.
and I thought that they were a bunch of really old
really
guys
old
at
men.
that time.
Yeah.
And my dad had the album, and I thought they were really good. But I did enjoy the album. But I still do, actually. I still think it's good. I mean, I've heard people disparage it, but I think it's a really fun album, and I think the fact that they weren't taking it too seriously. They did seem to do it in the whole spirit of having fun, didn't they? And I think that really shines through.
Yeah,
in the record.
It's a good body of work.
But when did this kind of genre of dad rock that we've been talking about in the 80s? It was big, wasn't it? Because there were people big, as well.
Yeah.
You could argue that Phil Collins is in this category as well.
Phil Collins is definitely in there. Yeah,
because he also took Genesis in that direction, didn't he? Certainly by the time of Invisible Touch, that was Genesis were kind of a dad rock band, and then there was Mike Rutherford's Mike and the Mechanics, which is kind of
Mike and the Mechanics,
kind of thing.
Yeah.
They were having success in the singles
Deacon
chart.
Blue, I always thought as a dad rock band, but they weren't.
I think they were a little bit more youthful, weren't they? A little bit more pop at the time.
Would the Beautiful South almost fall into sort of like not an aging parent band, but a sort of mid-30s?
The Beautiful South will probably go into a category called mum pop rather than dad rock.
Yeah. With Curtis Stigers and Michael Bolton. Because I tell you what, Phil, I know when my mum's been watching these videos, because if I mention Michael Bolton and have a pop at him for being boring,
Michael Bolton,
then my mum, I'm 46 years old. She tells me off. Have you watched him, Mum? Hi.
You can't cancel Michael Bolton.
I'm not going to cancel him.
How is she supposed to live without him?
Exactly. Because we were going to do a show, didn't we? We did speak about this, about our parents' jukeboxes. And I did buy a Curtis Stigers album, because my mum had a Curtis Stigers album. So
do you know, when he started, he was very much in the Michael Bolton genre, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah. Crooner.
But
he's jazz now, isn't he?
He's gone very much towards jazz.
Yeah.
Easy
He's a very handsome man as well. Back in the 90s, he had that long flowing hair, and he looked like he should be on a sort of Jilly Cooper romantic novel. You know, he's holding onto the mast of a boat while the big wave comes over.
Maintain the mullet.
Yeah. Maybe we should grow mullets.
Yeah. Where was that? Yeah, the dad rock era. Did the Travelling Wilburys album also herald the end of the original dad rock era? Has there been as very much music in that genre since? I mean, I think it did carry on, didn't it? Because Chris Rea was still having quite a lot of success in the early 90s.
Robert Palmer.
In the early 90s. And then, of course, there was, do you remember Eric Clapton's Unplugged album?
Yeah, that was
a very big seller. So that was kind of a dad rock classic, wasn't it?
The Best of Bread. That was a big album in our house.
Yeah, but that's 70s. When did it?
Yeah, I know.
When did new dad rock stop being made? What was the last What was the last album by a band that had a sort of a more of a middle-aged, a rock kind of group?
Do you know what? It's going to be some of those mid-90s. The Bee Gees. The Bee Gees had an album out with The Loan on it in around 96, 97.
But they're not really rock, though, are they? They're more towards the pop side.
But
you know?
Phil Collins had an album out around that time.
In the 90s,
and Sting did. So I think it's those two, and then it just faded.
There wasn't really anybody in the 2000s
doing dad rock,
apart from some of those artists who were still making records, but they maybe weren't selling as many as they were in the 90s, were they?
No.
I mean, Sting's still making albums, and Martin Knopfler's making albums, but they're not really big in the mainstream now, are they?
No.
I don't think has there actually been one at all that has been big in the mainstream in the last 20, 25 years? An album that was as big as like a Chris Rea Road to Hell or Dire Straits Brothers in Arms.
No,
there hasn't really been anything like that.
No.
Not even as big as a Sting's 10 Summoners Tales or I think no.
No,
I think maybe it's fair to say that. Sorry if I'm interrupting. the Eagles are maybe. I did hear the Eagles the other day
Yes.
on the radio. Are they perhaps the American Dadrock, definitive Dadrock group?
Dadrock. Yeah, I kind of get that. Yeah, I kind
Are
of
they
get that
kind of
impression with the
are they kind
Eagles
of
that they
the
would be.
American version of Dire Straits? Yeah.
So I've always said Deep Purple because when I was at school, everybody's dad seemed to have a Deep Purple album. Well, not everybody's, but there was a few
Okay.
people with Deep Purple albums, which kind of, or Queen. Queen were very dad rock for me in the 90s.
They probably, yeah, because I suppose they were appealing, certainly, especially from the 80s on, they were appealing to a mature audience, weren't they, really?
Yeah, yeah,
So I think
yeah.
you could put them in that category. So that would have to be one of the defining dad rock albums. I made a list of albums that I think are like some of the greatest dad rock
Dad
albums of
rock.
all time.
Go on then.
Well, there's how about any of the albums by Toto? And I think Toto
Oh
4
God.
is the one with because they were session musicians, so they were kind of a super group of session musicians. So they were kind of very dad rock, weren't
Super
they?
group of turd.
American dad rock. It's not all bad, you know.
Yeah.
Have you listened to some of the albums? I bet you haven't, have you? No, exactly. What about Supertramp? That's another, you know.
Yeah, that falls into like a deep.
Br-
Doctor Hook.
Breakfast in America, because that was never a youth culture album, was it? Breakfast in America, that was a middle-aged rock album. So I think Breakfast in America.
Who's the one who did Baker Street?
It's Jerry Rafferty. No, yeah. Again, I suppose that could be
Dad
in
rock.
that category. Is it fair to say? You see, I don't like to define the Who as a dad rock band because they were so, you know, cutting edge when they started.
Yeah.
So I think the Who are still a bit rebellious, aren't they? So I don't think they're not easy. They're not as.
We're not putting them in.
I don't think the Who counts as dad rock. Genesis, Invisible Touch, 80s dad rock classic.
Yeah,
can we have ZZ Top in the dad rock category?
Yes, they're dad rock.
So that's Eliminator is their top album.
Yeah, I've got that.
Clapton, Slow Hand. That was probably was that the start of Clapton being totally dad rock? Maybe it was.
Yeah. I've always
Now another good one. This is a good album actually. I haven't heard it in a while. Mark Knopfler, Sailing to Philadelphia. Maybe his most popular solo album. That's a good one.
What about Bruce Springsteen?
This is another question. Is Bruce Springsteen dad rock? Because
I think he might.
Of course,
be.
when he started, of course, in the 70s, he was appealing to a probably largely young audience, but maybe some of his audience were also in their 30s, maybe even at the time. I'm not quite sure.
I think you could almost put him in.
But he's not really making records for kids, is he? And he's not really writing songs about things that are for young people. He's writing from a more mature perspective.
Yeah,
so maybe Bruce is also dad rock.
Dad rock.
So maybe he is. So we'd have to. What we'll report as is. You'd have to put one of his more commercial albums, maybe Born in the USA, as a dad rock classic dad rock album. Is Fleetwood Mac dad rock? I think it's fair to say that once Buckingham and Nicks joined the band,
I think they became more middle of the road
into the adult rock category, didn't they? So maybe Fleetwood Mac counts as that.
And
so Rumours would obviously have to be probably the obvious album, and then Hotel California, the Eagles. That's kind of dad rock,
dad
isn't
rock.
It?
Yeah.
Now here's another one. Is Pink Floyd dad rock? Because Pink Floyd, of course, started as a psychedelic band in the late 60s, and they were, they were cool, cutting edge. They were part of the avant-garde back in,
I know, but if you've got
Sid
blokes
Barrett
now in their 60s wearing a Pink Floyd t-shirt, then that means they've always been dad rock.
And they've never been super rebellious, have they? But they've been
and it's that kind of laid back sort of.
But Roger Waters is quite dark and in his lyrics and quite, it's it's not easy going lyrically, is it?
No, no.
It's quite unsettling in a lot of parts. So maybe they're a bit too edgy in a way.
Edgy like a balloon.
Lyrically edgy, anyway. But then musically, you can
Yeah,
say
yeah.
they're more into the.
I'm scanning my collection to see if anything steps out at me as being dad rockish, but I can't really see.
The other
Creedence
one,
Clearwater Revival.
yeah, no, you're going back to the late '60s there, and of course they were a
Cool.
popular band
They're
to young
not dad
people
rock.
at the
I'm
time.
not putting them in dad rock.
No, if a band came along a little bit later on, sounding like Creedence, maybe they would go in the dad rock category, which
Yeah,
kind of Dire Straits did, but 10 years
yeah,
later.
yeah.
But yeah, you mentioned this one, or did one of us mention this one earlier? I think Chris Rea, "The Road to Hell." That was another.
Yeah, that is dad rock because he's got everything: slow guitars, a good catchy chorus, and the
Slightly gruff
voice.
voice, bit of a gruff
Yeah,
voice,
yeah,
but
yeah,
lovely, beautiful guitar and a
yeah.
gruff voice, which is
He's
sort of the recipe for Mark Knopfler as well, isn't it? Really?
he's from the northeast as well.
Yeah, Middlesbrough, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Chris Rea. I'd say Chris Rea and Dire Straits and the Travelling Wilburys are the three ones I'd go to first. As if I was going to the Dad Rock Library, they're the poster boys on the front of it, and at the back somewhere's Phil Collins and a bit you don't really go to.
Yeah, maybe. There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, viewer, are there any acts that we've missed? Don't get offended because we do like a lot of this music, don't we?
We do. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We're just having fun with the label, and we're just having a laugh about it. But what we do really
I'm not.
genuinely dig a lot of these artists.
Yeah, yeah. See, like we said, the bands that we listened to in the 90s, now to the next generation, are dad rock.
It's just mad to think that Blur is considered. But then I suppose you could say that the album Blur made this year, is it aimed at young kids? It's not really, is it? It's not aimed at the teenage market. So maybe they have become a dad rock band.
Yeah.
So does that mean you're going to a dad rock concert in Cardiff to see Oasis? Is that a dad rock concert that you're now going to see?
I think you'll find, Phil, that I'm going to watch Cutting Edge Rock.
Cutting Edge Rock. as 52-year-old Liam
and 50
swaggers on with a can of. Is he 52? He's about
52,
my age.
Yeah, 1970. He's 53 this year, so that means Noel is. I think Noel's 11 years old, so he's 57. He's either 57 or 58 on Noah's birthday.
But you're not dad rock if you swagger on with a can of lager and a parka. And sing about and pronounce sunshine as sunshine. That's not dad rock.
It's got what they call it. 8.
Because we're not mumbling it, so that's not dad rock.
Let's have a look. Noel syllables. That's what I was looking for. Noel Gallagher is. I'm sure he's 50. Whoa, he's going to be 58 this year.
What if Noel decides to debut a new song and it's got a 10-minute guitar solo and he mumbles it? I mean, then you can't escape the label, then, can you?
Oh, I'll tell you what, it'd be the best mumbling dad rock piece of music I've ever heard. 58 this year. Then again, I didn't have to do the maths because I always remember he was 27 when Don't Look Back in Anger got released. So, yeah, that was 30 years ago this year. So, yeah. Maths, who would have thought? Adds all the numbers up. Isn't it?
Yeah. Well, viewer, have we missed any dad rock? Are you offended by our label? Have you got any other theories on this loose genre and when it ended, how good it was, or whatever you want to say about it, whatever memories we've brought back for you or not?
Some horrible ones. We've mentioned Phil Collins. I love you, Phil. He did some good tracks.
He did do some good tracks. I have become, maybe it's my age, I've started to become more favourable because I was never into buying Phil Collins records, and I never bought Sting's records.
I think he gets an unfair rap, doesn't he?
I did buy some Dadrock at the time, and I did quite liked Rhea, and I liked Knopfler, and I liked Springsteen, and I like there's a lot that I like, and I liked the Wilburys. I enjoyed the Wilburys, but I never bought a Phil Collins album, and I never bought a Sting album. But I've become a bit more favourable to them in recent years. Is that because of my age? I'm just being a little bit. Oh yes, it's no.
Yeah.
Is it because I'm just being a little bit rose tinted about the past, or now thinking I used to find them a bit annoying, but now I'm sort of, because there was a lot of hype. There was a lot of hype around Phil Collins and Sting, wasn't there, back in the 80s?
Yeah.
90s?
Yeah.
And when they did anything new, they got a lot of coverage, and it was all as if everybody was expected to like it, and it got a bit annoying. And then it was all over the radio, and it was just like we didn't really need to buy a Phil Collins album, did you? Because it was just on the radio all the time.
Yeah.
So, but now looking back, his vocals don't. I maybe like his vocals a bit more now than I did then. But maybe is that also a little bit of nostalgia?
I don't mind it. I don't. I watched the video and that for Is It in the Air Tonight? Whatever, about 10 times the other week. So
the drumming by Collins is exceptional. He was a great drummer.
Yeah. And
Sting, I've also listened a bit more to the Police recently. So maybe I'm getting a bit more used to just hearing Sting. Not that I need to get used to hearing Sting, because again, you've heard him so much on the radio. But
I will say this about the Police: they're not a band I've ever really liked.
No, I've never really been into them particularly, but I have to respect them because they did have some good musical ideas.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
And if you listen more, you might get into it more. If you expose yourself to more of it, maybe you could become a fan.
Last time I exposed myself, Phil, it didn't end well.
Don't expose yourself to the Police. That's really not a good idea.
Exactly. I like what you did there.
So I think with that viewer, with that exposure, we'll wrap it up. We'll cover everything for tonight.
That's what the Police said to me. You need to wrap that up. Look at it. It's so pointless and insignificant.
I'm just trying to think of a police pun. My head's whirring.
Go on.
I can't think of a police pun. I can't.
Oh dear.
Hang on, wrapped around your finger. That was one of them, wasn't it? Was that
I don't
wrapped
know.
around your finger, the police? I think it was.
Oh, there we go then. We've come up without even thinking about it.
I'm sure it was the Police. Hang on, am I? I've got to check it now. I can't type very well on my phone these days. Yes, it was. It's on Synchronicity, wrapped around your finger.
There we go. So we did come up with a pun in the end.
We
unintentionally.
Did. Everything Ben does is magic, and
I know.
Yeah, I can't think of another Police moment.
No. Let's not bother.
Thanks, viewer. Until next time, keep Dadrock.
Subscribe.
We will return. Bye for now.